turn Facebook off. Okay, let's see. I think it's working. I can hear a little bit of feedback. Can you hear it?
Yes.
You can hear the feedback?
Yes. Should I plug in headphones? Would that be better?
Try it. Let's see if that helps.
Give me 1 second.
Let me double check YouTube. Yeah, we're live.
All right, you can let me know if this is any better on your end.
Okay, sorry. Should not have YouTube and this open at the same time. Noted. Yeah, I'm still hearing it.
Yeah, me too.
Here, let's see if, I'm gonna mute. Let's see if that helps.
I don't hear it anymore.
Okay, you try muting. I wanna see if I can hear it.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Great, I can't hear it. So let's do this. We'll just make sure one of us is muted while the other's talking. How's that sound?
I can still hear it a little bit when your mic is on, but not as much.
Hold on, let me make sure my husband's not online. It might be my bandwidth. I might have sucky bandwidth right now. Hey, Jordan, are you online? Yeah, it's cutting into it. Do you mind shutting it off? Just a sec. I'm gonna turn my phone off too. Hi, buddy. Thanks. No, you're fine. Okay, is that any better, Catherine?
I can still hear it a little bit, but yeah, I think it's better.
Okay. Once I stop moving, maybe it'll help. I hope it's not mine because these headphones are really pretty good.
All right.
Yeah, I can't hear it now. Let's see. Who have we got? Okay, 4 minutes to 6. I'm just gonna check Facebook, see if anyone's having any problems.
Oh, is just the link that we're in a good link to send out to people who might want to join?
Hold on, can you say that again? You broke up.
Oh, sorry. Is just the link in the web address bar a good link to send to anyone who might want to listen in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, just that YouTube link.
Okay.
Not the
oh, yes.
Google Hangouts.
Okay, so it will be live on.
It's live on YouTube right now. Yeah.
Perfect.
I think we are both live on YouTube right now as I'm like running around my house.
I still see your face, just like your profile picture when I'm on the YouTube page itself. And a countdown bar, so I don't think we are actually live yet.
Sorry, you're breaking up big time. Can you say that again?
Oh, sorry. I hope that doesn't interfere with the call too badly. I'm right next to the router.
It's probably not you. It's probably my internet because there's a storm coming in.
Gotcha. I said that I have the YouTube page pulled up, and it's just your profile picture. So.
Oh, okay. It probably just showed it live for me then, because I'm like in the creator studio or whatever.
Okay.
You know what? I think because it seems like I'm not getting feedback or you're not choppy as long as we keep talking. Okay. So I don't know. Maybe once I'm muted, it'll be good. But I actually might mute my video. Once you go, I'll mute my video and my sound. So then everything's just going to your juice, and I'll have you pulled up like this.
Okay.
That might help. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
My internet is mountain internet, that's for sure. Let's see, so we have 2 people. I don't know if that's actually us, though. I'm still trying to figure this out. Oh, you know what? It's just anytime I do something. Sorry. Okay, we're just about there and then we can get started. Do you have YouTube up so you know like once it goes live?
I think it did already go live actually.
Oh.
Got it in a new tab. Hi guys.
I don't know what's going on. Last time I pulled up YouTube, it caused major havoc, so I don't even want to try again. All right, we'll give like 1 or 2 more minutes.
Sounds good.
We'll figure this out. My internet is really sucky sometimes, you guys, so I think if there's feedback, it's my fault. But once Catherine gets going, I think it should work out just fine.
We'll cross our fingers.
Yeah, so living in the mountains has its costs, that's for sure. So, Catherine, I think you should explain to everyone why you have blue hair, first of all.
Oh, absolutely. So, first of all, I have blue hair because why not have blue hair? That's the big ultimate reason. But recently, I've been a little bit obsessed with the ocean. My debut novel, Breakwater, came out about, what is that, 2 months ago now? I can't count very well, but it came out at the end of May, and it is about mermaids and murder and mayhem. So basically, all of the most fun things in life. And so yes, I have ocean hair right now.
That's awesome. Mermaids, murder, and mayhem. It's like the perfect tagline. That's great. Okay, well, it's 6:01. We've got a few people logged in. People will trickle in as they can. So let's go ahead and get this started because everyone is short on time. So we're going to keep this to a brief 30 to 40 minutes so everyone can keep going on their day. But everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're hitting live, we're excited to see you here. Feel free to write questions in the comments and I'll figure out how to get onto YouTube without throwing the internet wacky. And thanks for coming. For those of you that are going to listen to this as a replay, thanks for coming. I am a parent. I have a husband in the military, so I understand that time frames just don't always work out, but we're happy that you wanted to watch. So I'm really excited to have Catherine. She and I have been working together like, gosh, 4 or 5 years now.
Oh, it's been a while, yeah.
Yeah, she worked on my debut novel, and that was 11 novels ago. So that was many moons, and we've been through a lot together. So I'm excited for you guys to meet her and work through this editing process with her. Just keep in mind, she's in the Indie Author Life group. So if you don't get your questions answered tonight, you can always post. We'll post a thread in the group so you can answer any questions that you have that came out from the video. And she's always available there as a resource to you. So I'm going to mute my microphone and my video, so all the bandwidth goes to you guys, and Catherine is going to take over now.
All right, thanks so much, Katie. So I'm here basically to talk to you guys about editing and the editing process and answer any questions that you have for me. I have some notes here based on some questions that you sent me ahead of time, but I really fundamentally want this to be about you and about what's going to be most helpful for your development as a writer. So by all means, you know, if you have any questions, send them to us in the chat box so that we can make sure that we get those answered in this 30-minute time frame. So as I was thinking about editing and about the questions you sent, I decided to divide this information into more or less 2 categories. So the first category we're going to talk about is going to be about the self-editing process. You know, once you have your first draft, how do you then get that ready for an editor before you start taking those strides with your team that you gather around you toward indie publication. And then after that, I'm going to talk about working with a professional editor and some things on how you choose them, how you work well with them. But let's start out by talking about what do you do as you're writing your book before you even get to the stage where you're ready to actually give it to a pro and you're ready to hire someone. So I like to think of it in terms of the drafts that you do on the novel. And remember, as I'm saying this, this is not a one-size-fits-all like rule or framework that everyone will apply and will get exactly the same results. Writing is a very individualized process, and you may find that some of this works really well for you. You may already have existing processes that are working really well and that you don't want to change. And that's just fine. In fact, that's fabulous, because at the end of the day, what we want to do as people who edit, as people who coach, is to help you find the process that works for you to be putting out professional quality novels and really working as a professional author in this industry. But that said, having worked in the industry for several years now, I've seen some broad contours of what can tend to work best for most people. So I'm just going to share how I've seen this process work for people, how this process has worked for me, and hopefully you'll find some of this applicable to your own process as you're writing your book. So first of all, let's address the first draft just really briefly. One of the questions that I got was actually about editing and the first drafting process. Someone wanted to know, at what point do you start editing? As you're first drafting, do you go back to keep your draft updated as you realize, oh, this aspect of the novel has actually changed from what I thought it was going to be before, or do you just write the first draft? And when do you know that it's time to go back and layer new information in through the story? Again, there are a lot of different opinions on this, and different processes might work well for different people, but the advice I always give people is to finish the first draft. Finishing a first draft is a marathon. It's a crazy accomplishment, and you will feel so proud of yourself when you have done it. But the reality is most first drafts that get started don't ever get finished. And one of the reasons for this is because people, they get stressed. They think about all of the revisions they're going to have to do. They realize, oh, this chapter that I just wrote really sucks. Yes, it does. That's why it's a first draft. It's a starting place. It's not where you're going to be, and it's not where you're going to end the journey at. So just embrace the process and realize that it's okay that the first draft is not everything that you hoped and dreamed it would be, and nobody's is. I go back and look at my first drafts, and I want to hide under a rock. They're just not pretty, and no one's is really. So my advice to people is always finish the first draft before you go back in and make a single edit, before you layer anything into the rest of the story. When I was writing Breakwater, my debut novel that came out a couple of months ago, I realized as I was writing like the third to the last scene that my character had a younger sibling. My main character did. This was something that I had been totally unaware of through the whole process of writing the book. But she basically, she's a mermaid, so she basically swam up to me and said, the only way that my motivations are going to work here is if I have a younger sibling. And layering in something as central as a really major character seemed daunting at the time. But if you take the drafting process step by step, it's really not that bad. So after you have finished the first draft, set it aside if you can, at least for a few days. I cannot always do this because I tend to run up right against the deadlines I set with my editor. But if you have time, set it aside for a few days or even a few weeks to let it breathe and to give yourself some space from it, because it's a lot easier to objectively edit your own work after you have had the space and you're not quite as attached to every word on the page. Once you are going back in and editing the second draft, then the fun really begins. I love the revision process. It's an absolute beast, but it's one of the most fulfilling parts of writing, at least for me. So another question that we got when before the webinar started was how. It was what drafts do you use to work on specific problems? So do you use the second draft to work on specific things in the book? What about the third draft? And again, I just want to emphasize that this is an individualized process, and different writers will find that different things work for them. I tend to like to start with the bigger picture issues early on and work down to the smaller issues later. So when I'm doing my second draft, I'm not going to be overly concerned about whether a particular sentence sounds like it flows really smoothly, because I'm going to be busy looking out for really big picture things. So at that stage, I'm going to be asking myself, you know, are there any plot holes that you can drive a truck through that I just didn't realize as I was first drafting? Do the characters have really clear motivations? And especially the antagonist. A lot of people think that the protagonist is the most important character in the book. And this can be true, but I've seen a lot of really good books that were weakened a lot by antagonists that didn't have clear motivations and just seemed to be there for the sake of advancing the plot. So just making sure that all of the important characters have really traceable motivations that make sense as they're advancing the plot. I'll look at world building issues. Is there something that isn't explained well enough? Are there aspects of this culture that are going to be confusing to people? This is also the time when I'll look at major themes of the novel. Am I foreshadowing things enough? How are these themes being carried through? And if you're writing third person especially, this is the time where you really want to look for point of view slips. So you'll ask yourself, am I peeking into more than one character's head per scene? This is something that it's really easy to slip up on. And the second draft is a really good time to look for places that you're doing that in. After the second draft, again, if you have time, if your production schedule allows for it, I recommend that you set it aside for at least a day or two before diving in to make a third draft of it. And then in the third draft, what I like to do at that point is, you know, still looking for any big picture issues that I missed, but really paying attention for smoothing out the sentences, trying to make it at that point as clean as possible before it goes to the editor. And then if I have time to do a fourth draft, which usually I don't, oftentimes I will send a third draft to an editor. It's better if you send a fourth draft. But at that point, I'm really just looking to smooth things out, clean up as much as I can. Again, at this point, we're still in the self-editing stage, so there will still be some pretty big picture things to take care of. But you really do, especially if you're on a budget and you're trying to get as low of a quote as possible for editing, you want that manuscript to be as clean as it can be through the whole thing. You want it to read as smoothly as you can get it to read. You want it to have as few typos as you can, because that will signal to the editor that, one, you're taking this really seriously, you're devoted to your craft, and two, that they will just have less cleaning up to do, which then will allow them to give you a lower quote for the number of words in your manuscript. So that's the process that I personally use. A lot of my writers use a similar process to really good effect. Again, figure out what works for you. You know, take these stages and figure out what works with your style of writing and what you're going to have to tweak a little bit so that you can finish a book and then start the next book. Because the most important thing to remember if you want to be a professional writer in the indie publishing industry is just to write the next book and to keep pumping out books. So that essentially is more or less the process that I would recommend for self-editing. I'm going to transition now into working with a professional editor. So we're going to talk a little bit about finding an editor and about the stages of editing, so that you can really feel confident as you're going into the second stage of the editing process, that there aren't any big things you're missing, and that you'll just feel confident as you're getting into all of this. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about finding an editor, which can be a really intimidating process. I always advise people to pick an editor based on word of mouth recommendations. Work with someone that a friend has worked with, that someone in the industry you respect has worked with, and that has done a good job for them. And feel free to ask people detailed questions about the experiences that they've had with their editor. You know, make sure that the editor hasn't disappeared with absolutely no communication for, 3 or 4 months at a time. Make sure that they have done a good job on previous manuscripts. that when any mistakes have been made, that they've been willing to bend over backwards to make them right. And just ask a lot of those questions so that you really feel comfortable with the skill level and the level of professionalism of the editor that you're working with. After that, once you've made contact with an editor or two that you think you might want to work with, really do your due diligence. Ask for references. If they don't want to provide references, that's a really big flag. Get a test edit if you can, especially if you're looking at someone for line edits or copy edits, which are going to be that later stage in the process. To make sure that you're really going to work well with this person and that their style is going to mesh with yours. Another question we had was in relation to how often should I take an editor's advice, specifically from someone who felt that an editor was changing so much that it changed their voice. And that's something that I would say you really want to be looking out for when you're getting a test edit, because a good editor is going to partner with you to help make your voice as strong as it could be, and isn't going to make every book they edit sound like they were the person who wrote it. So if you're currently working with an editor and you feel like every time they send you back comments, they're changing everything about the way you express your voice, get some outside opinions, maybe get some beta readers to compare scenes that you wrote versus scenes that the editor has worked on, to make sure that these are changes that are too substantial. But at that point, that might be a case where your style is just not meshing with the editor's style, and it might be time to find someone that you're going to work a little better with. That doesn't necessarily say anything bad about the editor that you've been working with. They might be a perfect fit for someone else or for one of your friends, but maybe they just didn't work with your particular style, if that makes sense. So those are the big things that I would say to pay attention to when you are picking an editor. Which, going back to that question about how do I know when to take an editor's advice and when to go with the way I had originally phrased something, is if you really trust the editor that you work with, try to take their advice most of the time. You don't want to be paying someone, hundreds or thousands of dollars to edit your book and then only take their advice, 30 or 40% of the time. That's something where you really won't have gotten your money's worth out of that editorial process. So if you really make sure at the beginning that you're working with someone you trust, then you should feel comfortable most of the time taking most of their edits. So if you have any more questions about that, please make sure to post them. I'd love to talk more about any of those issues. I'm going to transition now into talking a little bit about what to expect when you're working with an editor, specifically what the different editing stages look like. So here at Quill Pen Editorial, which is the editing service that I run, I divide editing into about 4 stages. The stages are developmental editing, line editing, copy editing, and proofreading. So I just want to break those down really quick for you, so that when you are talking with a prospective editor, you'll have an idea of what it is specifically that you're looking for with your book, so that you and the editor can be on the same page. Because precise communication with your editor is really important to the overall relationship, and will really make sure that you get exactly what you're looking for out of the editing process. So first of all, I always recommend, especially with early novels, that everyone start out with at least some developmental editing. Developmental editing is going to focus on those big picture things. You remember the areas that I recommended that you work on in your second draft, point of view slips, plot, character development, world building. Those are all things that the editor is going to look at during the developmental review. Essentially, at that point, we're looking for big picture things that are really going to help it just flow a lot better, be a lot more readable, make sure that the pacing is correct, that sort of thing. At that point, after you've gotten those comments back, implemented as many of them as you choose to take, then I highly recommend, again, especially if you're early on in the process, if this is your first or second or third book, that you invest in a line edit. Now, a line edit is probably the most expensive stage of the process because there are a lot of changes that that the editor has to make when they're line editing a book. At that stage, the editor is looking for anything that doesn't quite flow smoothly in the book. So they'll be going line by line, sentence by sentence, and essentially smoothing things out and making your prose more readable. They will also fix any typos or grammar errors that they happen to catch as they're doing it. But looking for typos and looking for grammar errors isn't the primary hat they're going to be wearing. So the focus just isn't going to be there. The stage that focuses on the grammar errors, on typos, on spelling mistakes, punctuation, is going to be copy editing. Copy editing is the third stage in the process, and I would say this is the most indispensable part of the process. We've all read independent novels that had 5 or 8 punctuation errors on the first page. And it's always really heartbreaking because a lot of those stories are really wonderful stories that deserve to be heard, but a lot of people aren't going to give them the chance if they're riddled with grammatical errors. So if you're budgeting and you're really trying to figure out what can I afford on this book, and things are just tight, I definitely think that a copy edit is the one thing you really don't want to go without, because it helps your book just have that extra layer of professionalism, so that it doesn't look like something that is going to get slept off in the indie slush pile as soon as someone has read the preview on Amazon. So I definitely recommend to not skip the copy edit. For my book, even though I had, written it and self-edited it a lot, and gone through a developmental edit and a line edit, I still had 2 different copy editors go over it just to catch any last errors, because it was really important to me that the book be as error-free as possible by the time it released. And then the last of the 4 stages of editing is the proofread. A proofread is similar to a copy edit in some ways, except that it is done on a manuscript that is already formatted. So someone's going to be looking over your PDF, looking for any typos, anything like that the copy editor might have missed, and also looking for anything that went terribly wrong during formatting. If you hire a good formatter, you have a lower chance of this happening. But even the best people will occasionally have little things that slip through. A line break that starts too early, or a line that spacing is just too tight. You'll see that occasionally. So having a proofreader that can catch those last grammatical errors, and that can also pay attention for anything in the typesetting that might be an issue, is absolutely invaluable at that stage. And then once you have gone through all of those steps, or as many as your budget will allow, then your manuscript is ready and edited and ready to take on the world. And something that I have really realized over the process of working with a lot of writers and writing my own book is you're definitely not going to please everybody. There will still be people who really don't like your book. But there's a huge difference between a book that has gone through a rigorous self-editing and professional editing process and books that were just, first drafts that were uploaded to Amazon. And those are going to be received very differently by their audiences. And there's going to be more of an audience for a book that has gone through a rigorous editing process. So those are just the basic answers to some of the questions that we received before. Since we are trying to keep it to more or less a half hour, I wanted to take a quick break to find out if we had any more questions that have come in during the webinar.
I've been looking and I haven't seen any come through right now.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. So let me move on to my next note card then. So then briefly, since we didn't have any other questions, I just wanted to run through a few things that are going to be big red flags in the editing process, and just a couple things that I didn't put in the initial finding an editor section because I wanted to make sure that we were able to get to your questions. So if you're taking notes, you can turn back to that page. There are just a couple quick things that I wanted to add. One is make sure that any editor you're working with is going to sign a contract with you. You won't necessarily do this for every book that you work on them with throughout the editing process. I usually probably only sign contracts for the first 2 or 3 books with most clients, but a contract is really helpful right off the bat because, again, communication is absolutely key in the editing process, and a contract lays out everyone's expectations really specifically, which safeguards both you and the editor from really big miscommunications that are then going to lead to dissatisfaction later in the relationship. So in that, the contract will lay out exactly what the editor is going to be doing, exactly how much it's going to cost, what the payment schedule is going to be, what the timeline is going to be, what the process is going to be if there is, if a dispute arises. Having a contract that addresses all of those things, especially early on in an editor-writer relationship, can be absolutely invaluable. Because remember, a contract isn't just about solving problems in case something goes wrong. It's about setting things up so that everything's clear, so that things don't go wrong to begin with. So make sure that, you know, right at the beginning you're signing those contracts with people. A second thing is try to communicate everything that you can in writing. I have some clients who prefer to have a phone conversation with me early on. I am 100% willing to do that, and sometimes that can be really good for getting comfortable with someone that you're going to be working with. But if you do have phone conversations with your editor, have one party or the other type up everything that you guys discussed on the call right afterwards, so that in 6 months you don't have 2 entirely different recollections of how one point of the conversation went. So those are just a couple things as you're developing a relationship with a new editor, to keep in mind, to keep everything flowing smoothly throughout the process. Because if you can, you know, you want to get a small team of editors. You know, you'll have a different developmental editor than copy editor, for example. But a small team of, you know, 2 to 5 people that work with you on the same steps on the same books time after time after time, to help keep your books consistent, and to really approach your books with a deep understanding of who you are as a writer, and what your voice is and how to best preserve your voice. So just having those clear lines of communication from the beginning can be absolutely invaluable, so that you can hopefully stick with more or less the same group of people over a long period of time, rather than having to find and rehire a new editor with every book that you write. So yeah, that's the material that I have for today. It looks like we're sticking more or less to the half hour, unless any other questions have come in.
Sorry, my internet wigged out for a second.
Oh no, just making sure that that no other questions came in.
No, not that I saw. I need to double check and make sure the comments function was enabled on YouTube, but we'll check that with the next time. Nothing came through the Facebook group. So excellent. Huge thanks, Catherine, for all that awesome information and for doing this and providing this information. It was great. Now, where can people find you?
Absolutely. So I would love to talk with any of you about editing for your book. You can email me at catherine@quillpeneditorial.com, or just find me online in the Indie Author Life Facebook group and shoot me a message. And I would love to talk with you more about that. You can see my editorial firm's website at quillpeneditorial.com. And we work with authors from helping coaching writers through the first draft all the way through the final proofread. There are a number of editors that work with our firm, so we can provide you that team to work with you to make sure that you're getting enough sets of eyes on your manuscript. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you.
And I can attest to all of our editors. I think I've used all of them now, and I love them all. So definitely work with Quill Pen Editorial. If you have any questions, you can find her in the Indie Author Life Facebook group, and invite all of your indie author friends so they can have that support and that cohesion that they need to get the resources. And we will see you next time. Thanks, guys.